Joining me today, I have the CEO of Siloam Mission, Tessa Blaikie Whitecloud. Tessa, thank you so much for taking the time today.
It's my pleasure.
So, just recently, Winnipeg announced that they are awarding $25 million in grants to 11 local housing projects focused on affordable housing and projects located in downtown Winnipeg. I would love to know, as somebody who is in this world, what are your thoughts?
Just so excited that there has been a focus on affordable housing with this money from the Housing Accelerator Fund. Obviously, it was a condition of the fund, but also, excited to see that the projects awarded are actually projects that are going to be supporting groups that need housing. We, of course, put in an application and weren't successful this round. So we're looking forward to that next round to hopefully put in another application and maybe have things change for us, because we know that really housing is the solution to homelessness. So often we're thinking about homelessness as an individual's kind of life story or something happened to somebody. But in Winnipeg, it's literally a lack of social housing stock. We have 3 social housing units for every 20 low-income people. Calgary has 9, even Regina has 8. And so it's really about getting that housing online. That's what's going to help us solve homelessness. So just so excited that that's happening and that we have this opportunity through the Housing Accelerator Fund. And yeah, some really great projects got accepted.
Absolutely. So there is going to be 1,135 new housing units, 594 of them affordable units. Is that enough in your opinion?
Oh, absolutely not. This is the beginning of kind of getting that social housing stock we need online. If we're talking about just solving homelessness, we probably need in the ballpark of 4,000 to 5,000 units. And Right to Housing, which is a coalition of folks that kind of keep an eye on core housing needs. So that's folks that are, living in substandard housing, living in overcrowded housing, living in housing where maybe landlords aren't taking care of things. There are people living in housing in Winnipeg without running water, for example. They say we need about 10,000 units to solve that. So in total, we're 15,000 units behind where we need to be. And that's only looking at those that need deeply affordable and supportive housing. Never mind making housing more affordable by having more stock online for the average family.
I would love to know, and so would our listeners, for those who don't know, what has Siloam been doing to help people get back into a home? Tell me about your transition housing.
Yeah. So we have a couple different programs that support people who have experienced homelessness either chronically, which means more than 6 months of the last 12 or the last 6 months straight. So they're supported with a transition services caseworker, and we work with them on all of the little goals that you actually sometimes need to accomplish first before housing. So getting ID, getting set up with income, maybe getting employment, getting a doctor, and getting all of your mental health taken care of, and then kind of getting into housing. And then from that, it's a housing first model, which means after housing, it's still about stability and long-term success and building habits for successful housing. We also have a housing loss prevention program. So if folks are about to get evicted, or if a landlord's about to evict someone and feels really bad about it, they can give us a call and we can work with that person to hopefully prevent them from experiencing homelessness. And then in that middle range, we have housing focused caseworkers. So they work with folks who are newly experiencing homelessness. And that can look like rapid rehousing. That can look like, right now it's supporting a lot of asylum seekers and refugees that are experiencing homelessness in Winnipeg, kind of just getting people set up and hopefully out of homelessness for good. So on average right now, Siloam Mission houses somebody every 3 days, which is really cool. But unfortunately, across Canada, we don't have a local stat. For every 1 person we house within the sectors that are working on that, 1.5 people are kind of sliding into homelessness. So we're not actually getting ahead just yet. And again, in Winnipeg, a big barrier in getting ahead is that lack of affordable housing.
There has been, speaking of what you were just talking about, there has been a big influx of immigrants and immigration in Winnipeg over the last couple of years. Do
Mhm.
you find that many of them come and struggle to find housing at all?
I think a big part of the struggle is that they have to wait so long for the right paperwork to be able to enter into housing. So it's not, I think a beautiful story. We had a gentleman who lived with us it takes about 2 weeks to get the paperwork started. So he lived with us for that initial 2 weeks. He got his paperwork started. He actually lived with us for the next 3 months until he could get his documentation to start getting housing. So it's actually that there's a legal barrier for them to get started. He's now housed, but it's still going to take him several months to get his permanent residency and be able to work. And he volunteers here every single day in the interim. And so, it's a lot of folks that are really engaged and looking forward to building community and giving back. But there are those legal barriers that keep them in the homeless serving sector. Luckily, there is a shelter opening up through Welcome Place that is dedicated to refugees and asylum seekers that's going to support them on that journey and help them build community with each other. But right now, interestingly enough, about 30% of the people using Siloam services are refugees and asylum seekers. Whereas if you had asked me that 2 years ago, it would have been closer to 2 or 3%.
That is a big difference.
Yeah.
Winnipeg continues to grow. What can be done to ensure that we are seeing more developments that are affordable, in your opinion?
I think a big key is your listeners, making sure that they talk about the importance of social housing to them, that they recognize that, having adequate housing for our neighbors and wanting that and begging or, advocating to our elected officials on that is a way that we actively love our neighbor. It's a way that we shelter the unsheltered. It's a way that we act as Jesus would in our time. But also, I think it's super important that we continue to make investments. So it can seem like a lot of money up front, but study after study, even research done here in Manitoba, proves that that investment on the long term saves substantially. And it saves not only financially, but it saves in ambulance costs and hospital costs, and that increases ambulance response times and reduces emergency wait time. It saves in other social services and other programs. So it's really about having the longevity to make and the vision of longevity to make the investment now.
That makes sense. Thank you so much for sharing that. Is there anything else that you would like to share today, Tessa?
I think one of the core things that we need to think differently about when we think about housing and when we think about people experiencing homelessness is two. One is that housing might not look like the housing you or I want. That housing needs to be set up for them to be successful. And that can mean congregant housing with supports. That can mean housing with, the ability, if they're still using substances, to use substances safely. That can mean housing that addresses their specific needs. And so we need to think of outside of the box. And for us, what we're doing is we're starting a lived experience advisory council of folks accessing Siloam and wanting housing to guide us in that process. And the second piece is just to make sure that we are seeing every single person that's experiencing homelessness today as the image of God, as a reflection to us of sacredness and divinity that deserves better, and that it's our responsibility, or at least our ability to respond as a community to that need and love our neighbor.
Well said. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk a little bit more about this. We're going to share this with our listeners, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.